Apologize, I'm not sure I'm going to bring the mood up too much on this one, but I'm going to try towards the end. Lecture 7, I'm going to talk to you guys about a project that we've been working on for the past couple years, looking at Dendrogyra, the pillar coral, and the polar reef tract. I'm going to talk to you guys about our contributions to the species action plan and sort of what we're doing and what we've found so far. Talk to you guys about the development monitoring program, we'll look at the population distribution and abundance, and then I'll finish up with the actual population status and how we plan to move forward with the management objectives. Brief overview, this is the global distribution of Dendrogyra. So Dendrogyra is restricted to the Caribbean basin, sort of found throughout. Some information on Dendrogyra. It's typically described as uncommon or rare on reefs, and it's in its occurrence and observations on reefs. And it's also pretty unique in both its morphology and its appearance. So it's really the only coral on the reef. It forms these tall, wide pillars with an encrusting base, as well as having a fuzzy appearance. It's one of the most beautiful corals on the reef, especially from my perspective. But keeping its polyps, its tentacles out all day long, unlike most corals. It's found in the family Dendridae, which, as Nicole just mentioned, the two corals, Neandrina neandrides and Dichosynia stokesi. And the genus Dendrogyra. What's more interesting is that Dendrogyra cylindrus is a single species within the genus. And so this raises the conservation value of this coral pretty high. Reproductively speaking, like most corals, it reproduces asexually through fragmentation and sexually through broadcast spawning. However, previously it's been described as a gonophoric broadcast spawner, meaning the colonies exist as single sexes releasing their gametes into the water column or spawning. We have seen spawning, but it's a few observations. We're looking into that more, looking at more locations, but we've only really been able to capture that in 2 locations in the polar reef tract currently. In Southeast Florida, a few years ago, it became a species of special concern, and we realized that there was no comprehensive summary for population distribution abundance, and also the health status of the population. So it was approved for the biological status review, which from this review, they then reported through communications with colleagues and monitoring programs throughout the FRT that it was once found in higher abundances on the polar reef tract, that currently, due to the actual rare occurrences on the reef and observations from monitoring programs, that it had a low adult colony density, and also interestingly that from 1999 to 2016 and throughout the duration of this project in 2017, we haven't seen a single juvenile killer coral on the polar reef tract. So taking all this into consideration, it was listed as threatened under Florida state legislation, and in 2014 on the Endangered Species Act. Now, in the state of Florida legislation, in case you guys are familiar with this process, anything listed on under Florida state legislation then has to have an ISMP, or Imperiled Species Management Plan, for that species, and hopes to improve the conservation status of that species. However, knowing so little, as I mentioned, about Dendrogyra on the polar reef tract, we're really in the stage of gathering the important baseline information to really see actually what was out there. Within this ISMP, this is going to be really quick in case you aren't familiar with the process of the ISMP. It's handled by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and they propose these Species Action Plans, or SAPs. And what these Species Action Plans hope to do is to promote species conservation and population recovery through the implementation of management strategies for special permitting and protection laws, which they're then enforced through the FWC. The ISMP for the pillar coral, which was sort of our 10-year plan, this was come up with about 2 or 3 years ago, was to one, determine the distribution and status on the polar reef tract, maintain its area of occupancy, so its habitat, and to stabilize and increase the number of mature individuals that we have. If you look at the Species Action Plan, which we're going to talk to you about today, the main goals of this were to map population, perform those important demographic surveys, research the genetic structure, look into spawning and determining the sexual reproduction of this, since we knew so little about its reproduction and the lack of juvenile killer corals on the reef, and then look into, obviously, successful restoration techniques for the future. So what I did in NSU, my group really focused on objectives 1 and 3, which is what we're going to talk to you about today. So looking into the population distribution abundance, here's a map of the Florida reef tract. Now, typical population assessments, they usually, you put randomly stratified points on the map and you do in-situ surveys to get an idea of population abundance. Because we already knew there were so little observations of Dendrogyra on the reef, we knew this wasn't going to be a good technique to do. So we actually had to compile a database of reported locations from colleagues, stakeholders, anyone who could give us information dive charters, things like that. And this was done by Kate Lunds at FWC. She compiled 157 sites along the entire Florida Reef tract, and getting in there, ground truthing, doing the scuba surveys, we were able to locate 110 sites comprising 610 colonies of Dendrogyra. I'm not sure if you can see it all the way back, but you'll notice that this is by abundance, and all of those yellow dots along the Florida Reef tract are actually a single colony. So the majority of the sites on the Florida Reef tract only contain a single colony, which is interesting. Zooming in and looking at the Southeast Florida region, this is the distribution in abundance. From West Palm Beach in Orange County down to Miami County, just offshore Biscayne there. You'll see that again, a lot of our colonies existed as single colonies, or we did have a few multiple colony sites, mostly in Broward County. Now, 23 locations and 65 colonies were contained in the central region, the Southeast Florida region of Florida Reef tract. Once we had this data, then we decided to get started on the demographic surveys. We had to, through collaboration with other organizations, especially with FWC, we developed a novel monitoring protocol which hadn't been done for Dendrogyra yet. And in order to manage the entire Florida Reef tract and all those 610 colonies, we split up regional management delegations. Myself at NSU would manage the Southeast Florida region, and Karen Neely, who was a huge part of this project, handled all of those colonies in the Florida Keys with FWC. So with those 23 locations and 65 colonies, we monitored them triannually for 2 years, from May 2014 to actually April 2016. We were able to get out this past September and just check up on what was going on in Reef tract, so through September 2016. Data we looked at was obviously the important demographic data for the size and the depth of these colonies. More importantly, what I'm going to focus on today is the condition of these colonies, percent live tissue, percent and cause of recent mortality, and the percent of colony affected by bleaching. We also looked at, surveyed designated areas around pillar coral colonies, which are called plots. And in the plots, we looked at the species richness of the stony coral community within that area, and also any conditions noted on those stony corals, specifically the presence and type of any bleaching and disease on corals. So we'll look into the health status of the Southeast Reef tract. Here you see the graph of percent live tissue of colonies. We actually started out the project in May of 2014 with 84% live tissue. Colonies were pretty healthy. We had some old mortality that we couldn't obviously find a cause for. And it started to decrease, but was relatively constant until April of 2016, where we saw a decrease in live tissue to just 3%. And then, unfortunately, when we went out in September 2016 to see what we had left, we're down to 1% of live tissue on our known colonies on the Southeast Florida portion of the Florida Reef tract. Looking into sort of what was going on the reef, using the data to support this. This is a temperature graph taken at temperature loggers in nearby sites. And we have this 30.5 degree bleaching threshold described in the literature, which means any temperatures exceeding this value just increases the probability of a bleaching event occurring. And in August through October of 2014 and 2015, we had consecutive days exceeding this threshold value, increasing the probability of bleaching events, which in the data is pretty obvious. We saw spikes in bleaching, and this is prevalence, and bleaching prevalence in September of 2014, 15, and then actually again in 2016 with only a few colonies left. We see that interrelated phenomena of disease and bleaching that you mentioned earlier, an increase in disease and bleaching concurrently. And what's interesting is from September to April of 2015 to 2016, disease actually increased to 100% of our colonies being affected, which then remained constant through September 2016, with the remaining colonies all being affected by disease. Factors contributing to the recent mortality, which was mostly disease. You see the major contributors were white disease types and actually black band, and more specifically, white plague seemed to really affect these colonies. We didn't take samples to possibly identify it, but due to the rapid progression of disease we were seeing, and then also, the described susceptibility of pillar corals to white plague, we're mostly sure that this was white plague affecting these colonies. I'm going to take you through some photos, and if we can see them well enough back there, visually what was happening in the data as we went through. So in May of 2014, when we had 84% live tissue, colonies look pretty well, there's healthy fish communities surrounding these colonies. In September of 2014, we saw that the majority of our colonies bleached close to 100% of our live tissue in our first major bleaching event. Into January 2015, they actually fared pretty well. It seemed like they actually recovered, and they gained those of belly, they had good coloration, very little prevalence of disease at this point. That's January again. In May of 2015, we see that some of our colonies were beginning to be affected by white plague, and some of our colonies were actually still faring pretty well. They weren't bleaching, and they didn't have a high prevalence of disease. Unfortunately, by September of 2015, when we had our second bleaching event, you see this colony on the bottom. Not only is it diseased, but it's also bleached close to 100% of its live tissue. And unfortunately, the colony in the top image there is still alive, but very little. Most of it had succumbed to white plague and close to 100% mortality. To show you what happened in April 2016, I'm actually going to show you some before and after images of what we saw. So May of 2014, the first image that I showed you, by April 2016, we saw 100% mortality in this colony. Same for the bottom image, we have May 2014, and by April 2016, we saw 100% mortality in this massive colony. This is a colony in November of 2015. Relatively healthy, had a small active disease margin, but the colony was actually pretty healthy. And by April of 2016, just 6 months later, we lost 60% of this colony's live tissue, showing that rapid progression of the white plague disease. And it might be hard to see in that image, but most of this is old, dead skeleton with very little live skeleton left. To show you regionally what's happening in the data, our most northern sites in Palm Beach, which are actually deeper colonies with about 60 feet of water, we saw from May to April 2016 100% mortality. In the middle of Broward County, just north of Fort Lauderdale, and about 10 feet of water just offshore Pompano Beach, again, 100% mortality in this colony. And all the way to the southern portion of the step-free region, just offshore Biscayne, in about 15-20 feet of water, we saw, again, 100% mortality. For our insight stony corals, looking at maybe associations with the stony coral community, as Nicole mentioned, we did see this bleaching and disease event where bleaching and disease increased in September of 2014 and September 2015. We didn't take blood data this past September, we were just checking on killer coral colonies, so I don't have that data. And then looking at the different species affected, the top three were Acropora cervicornis, Muntastra cavernosa, and Cylindrus ciderea. And the disease types we saw were again white disease types, white plague, white bands, dark spot disease, which affects Cylindrus ciderea, and rapid tissue loss, which we know only affects Acropora cervicornis. So summarizing the population health status of the Southeast Florida killer coral population, meat colony live percent tissue decreased from 84% in May 2014 to just 1% now in September 2016, a drastic decline. Of the loss of colonies. We saw that the stress from bleaching and rampant white plague disease is sort of the major contribution to that mortality, and it's now stated that this relationship between warming oceans and coral bleaching and disease is actually now considered to be one of the most serious factors threatening the existence of coral reefs across the globe. So I think this is something that we as scientists need to really start getting a better handle on. And in 2 years, the total loss of colonies, we lost 94% of our colonies and 99% of our live tissue, and that's in just 2 years. So. Where are we now? Like I mentioned, we went out in September. We have 4 known colonies remaining, and all of these are showing signs of white plague. Now that's our known colonies. We can't say that we captured every single colony in the Step-Free region, but given the number of points that we ground truth and surveys that we did, I think we captured the majority of the population. So we have the colonies out there, but also looking at the trends in the data, unfortunately, I think that most of those colonies that may still be out there are probably suffering the same fate. To say that, it's been proposed that they were in a population decline, especially from that biological status review a couple years ago, to say that they're in a serious population decline at this point is a gross understatement. And it's quite possible that on the Florida Reef tract, especially in the Southeast Florida region, we're seeing a near local extinction event of an entire species. Very depressing, I'm sorry. However, there is, oh wait, I thought I had one more depressing slide. Okay, so this is this is a table I took from the final report that we put out in just this summer. This is a table including numbers from April of 2016 only. You'll see that, although the Southeast Florida region suffered the highest declines in live tissue, when you look at the regional data summed up totally, in April 2016 we had lost 60% of the live tissue. This is actually, reports from my colleagues here in Neely and Cindy Lewis down in the Keys. This number has changed. We haven't worked at the numbers yet, but we've lost entire sites in the Upper Keys. Pillar coral forest here is just about kicked the can, unfortunately, and this number is expected to increase. Now, on a positive note, right after we started seeing these trends in the data, Karen Neely and a few other people got together and we started the pillar coral genetic rescue effort. And we went out to collect 115 flat fragments along the entire Florida Reef tract. And these fragments then, we sent samples to Liliana Baum at Penn State University, and she worked at the genetic data for us. We know the genotype of each of these corals. And they were put in situ and ex situ nurseries throughout the Florida Reef tract. This is a picture of, you may have seen this in an email somewhere, but a pillar coral in Ken Niedermeyer's nursery down in the Coral Restoration Foundation. And what I wanted to emphasize in this slide is that all the logos up here, although they may not be holding pillar corals for us, each and every one of those organizations reached out to us through email, through conference calls, offering advice, help, hands to make this genetic rescue effort a successful effort. And so I think that's really important in moving forward, especially considering the restoration of the species, is to continue to work together and continue to reach out to each other and offer, your advice and your learning experience. One other thing we gained, so we had originally wanted to look into the sexual reproductive potential because of the lack of juveniles on the reef tract. And we were trying to look into, what's causing this reproductive failure. Now, we couldn't have prognosticated the drastic declines and what this data would mean, but we were still able to capture samples before this event had started. And I did histological analysis on these to gather important information that can be used in comparable studies in other regions of the Caribbean on colony sex, gamete count, developmental stages, so maturity, sizes of gametes in their developmental stages, especially mature gametes. And here's a picture of the histology showing you some of the different stages of the gametes. But one of the more important findings from this study, you'll see in this photo the presence of oocytes and spermatocytes both in the same polyp, in the same mesentery, and actually attached by the same mesentery or mesoglea. And that, folks, is a hermaphrodite. So for the first time within the literature, I mentioned they have been described as gonochoric, having single sexes. We report for the first time in the literature the presence of hermaphrodite corals, which is also very important in considering restoration techniques in the future. So from that pillar coral action plan, we did successfully complete the first 3 objectives. Unfortunately, this last objective is going to be more important moving on in the future, and I encourage any of you, if you have advice or learning experience in another area, to reach out to myself, Karen Neely, Cindy Lewis, and so on. So with that, I'd like to thank many, many people involved, especially Karen and Cindy and Caitlin at WC. They're a huge part of this project. And with that, I'll take any questions. Yes, Brian.
Sorry if I missed this, but have you attempted, or have other people attempted to take the remaining live colonies into onshore nursery to isolate them from?
Yes, that's part of that genetic rescue effort. They were in situ and ex situ nurseries. We have some in Go Marine Lab, Keys Marine Lab, and in some cases we had the genotypes. So in Southeast Florida, they're actually all unique genotypes, is what we found so far. However, in the Florida Keys, a lot of them are clonal. Those high density sites are mostly clonal. So in some instances on the Southeast Florida portion of the Florida Reef tract, we took the last remaining tissue of the only known genotype from the reef, which was a huge, high-risk thing to do, and put it on onshore nurseries. Those stayed isolated because most of those colonies had active disease on them at the time. But the thought was, we need to act now and take, this colony is obviously going to be consumed. If we don't take it, we at least need to try treating it. there was, I can't remember the name or the organization right now, someone actually, I just learned this, took pillar coral, put it in a bucket with, was it like antibacterial soap, something crazy, and actually was able to nurse it back to health, which was really, really cool. She isolated it in just a bucket with no aeration or anything, threw some antibacterial stuff in there that actually helped the colony. So that's now, I can't remember the name right now. But things are happening. Anyone else? Yes.
How was the survival once they were brought into the nurseries?
Pretty variable. Unfortunately, a lot of the Southeast Florida fragments that we took, they didn't fare that well being placed in buckets on the boat, then being taken on land, and being transported to the Keys. And already having active disease margins, they didn't fare so well. I don't know the exact numbers, but I did hear that a lot of them actually did not make it. The fragments that were taken to a marine lab, they tried the microfragment technique, which was really successful, and a lot of those colonies are doing much better. You see that colony in Candido Meyer's nursery is actually doing really well, so we're excited about that.